The crystal chandelier cast a fine light that reflected on the silverware in the banquet hall. Xia Wanqing stood under the arch, the lace of her wedding dress sticking lightly to her arms, her fingers trembling slightly as she held the bouquet tightly. While the guests were dining, a middle-aged businessman whispered to the people around him, "Fu Ting's move is a sure one, and he will take the Xia family's land and debt together." Another person nodded and glanced at her with scrutiny. "The words of the family lawyer last night are still echoing in my ears, sign or settle tomorrow." She took a deep breath and straightened her back. "This is not a wedding, this is a lifeline." Fu Ting walked from the side hall, wearing a high-collar suit that outlined his slender figure. Every step he took on the red carpet made a muffled sound. The whispers in the hall suddenly stopped, someone was holding a wine glass, and someone was adjusting their tie. He stopped in front of her, his eyes sweeping from head to toe, as calm as approving documents. "Ready?" The voice was low and unquestionable. She nodded, her throat going dry. The pastor stepped forward, spread out the Bible, and read the oath. The image of her father lying in the office flashed through Xia Wanqing's mind. Creditors blocked the door last month and she signed an agreement. The Fu family's capital injection can extend its life. But this life is tied to his hands from now on. "Mr. Fu Ting, are you willing to marry Xia Wanqing?" the pastor asked. Fu Ting locked eyes with her and said, "I do. From now on, I will pay off Xia's debt. Everything about her belongs to me." It was not a standard oath, but a declaration like the terms of a merger. Sporadic applause sounded around, and the elder nodded slightly and whispered, "Mr. Fu has always been straightforward." Xia Wanqing's heart sank, and these words confirmed her position, a business. "It's her turn. Ms. Xia Wanqing, are you?" She repeated mechanically, her voice as thin as a mosquito. Fu Ting frowned slightly, took her left hand and pushed the platinum ring between her fingers. The ring was cold and stuck in the joint. When he pressed it gently, she felt a slight pain in her finger bones. "Remember this," he whispered so that only she could hear. There was loud applause, flashbulbs came on, and reporters rushed forward. At the end of the ceremony, he took her hand, his palm dry and strong, and pulled her off the stage. The high heels tripped the red carpet, and he tightened her waist. "Follow me." His tone was calm, but like an order. When the guests stood up to toast, she smiled and exchanged greetings. Luo Li, who was wearing a red dress, came from the crowd, served champagne, and said to Fu Ting with a sweet smile, "Brother Ting, the wedding is so grand. Miss Xia, Brother Ting is busy at work, so you have to take care of him." Luo Li's eyes glanced at the Fu family bracelet on Xia Wanqing's wrist, and her tone was tentative. She is the daughter of the Luo family and has long coveted Fu Ting's territory. This wedding should have been her stage. Fu Ting nodded without looking at her. "She will learn." He turned around and led Xia Wanqing out of the main hall and toward the elevator. Luo Li's smile froze and she pinched the rim of the cup with her fingertips. This interfering Xia family ruined her plan. The elevator door is closed, and Xia Wanqing is relieved to be alone. She leaned against the wall and rubbed her temples. Fu Ting pressed the top button, put his hands in his pockets, and looked at the numbers. "What do tears mean?" he asked suddenly. She was stunned and tears fell down. "It's nothing. It's just, it was too fast." She wiped her eyes, her voice nasal. He turned around and wiped her tears with his thumb. The movement was surprisingly gentle, but so close that it made her heart beat wildly. "This is the path you chose. Xia's debt has been cleared, and you will pay back what you owe me from now on." The breath on his face was not gentle, but a reminder. She had nowhere to escape, and complex emotions arose. In her helplessness, she felt a trace of dependence. The elevator dinged and the bridal suite was at the end. Fu Ting opened the door, candlelight flickered, and rose petals made the bed. He let go, took off his coat and threw it on the sofa, walked to the wine cabinet and poured 2 glasses of red wine. "Drink something to relieve your tension." She took the glass, her hands shaking slightly. The room was silent except for the pendulum. He leaned against the window, his back to her, overlooking the lights. Xia Wanqing sat on the edge of the bed, feeling overwhelmed by the wedding dress. The contract stated, 1 year of marriage, no sexual obligations. But will he watch the wedding night? She peeked at his back, his shoulder line stretched in the shadow of the lamp, like an invisible wall. The wine was bitter, she took a sip, and vaguely heard footsteps outside the door, light and fast, and her heart tightened. Ting turned around and approached with a cup in hand, his eyes dark. "Take off your wedding dress and change into your nightgown." The order was concise, like a work instruction. She was stunned and the cup almost slipped. "Is this the beginning or a prison?" There was a knock on the door, and Luo Li's voice was sweet. "Brother Ting, I have a gift that I want to give you personally." Ting's expression remained unchanged, but he became impatient. Xia Wanqing thought to herself, why did this woman break in tonight? Ting turned his eyes to the door and frowned slightly. He put down his wine glass, stood up and opened the door. Luo Li leaned against the doorframe, her red dress reflecting the dazzling luster under the corridor light, holding a velvet gift box in her hand. "Brother Ting, happy wedding. This is given to you by the Luo family. I hand it over to you personally." Her voice was sweet, but her eyes looked past him and stared directly at Xia Wanqing in the room. "Leave it at the door." Ting didn't reach out to take it, and spoke calmly. He held the door frame with his hand to block the way, preventing her from taking another look. Luo Li handed out the box and then took it back, her nails scraping against the suede with a soft sound, and unwillingness flashed in her eyes. "Brother Ting, you always took my things before." She lowered her voice, trying to recall old memories. Inside the box were not only gifts, but also old photos she had collected, reminding her that the 2 families had discussed marriage. "Don't mention the past." Ting closed the door, which made a low muffled sound. Luo Li stood there, holding the box tightly, her knuckles turning white. She turned and left, walking faster, dialing the phone as she walked. "Assistant, check Xia Wanqing's details, the more detailed the better. I will collect Ting's debt." Silence returned to the room. Xia Wanqing squeezed the rim of the cup tightly with her fingers, and the coolness from the cup wall seeped into her palms. Ting walked back and stopped in front of her, his eyes falling on the wedding dress. "Go on, take off your nightgown." She took a deep breath, turned her back to him and pulled down the zipper. The lace felt cold to the touch as it slid down her shoulders. She put on the nightgown on the bedside, and when she turned around, he had already sat back on the sofa, focusing on the screen of his mobile phone without looking up. "The guest room, the one at the end of the corridor." He pointed to the door, stood up and left the master bedroom. Xia Wanqing touched the ring on her left hand, and the platinum edge pressed into her knuckles, causing slight pain. He indeed abided by the non-sexual clause of the contract. She opened the door to the guest room. The walls were painted white, the closet door was half open, and there was nothing inside. Just the single bed and the city lights behind the curtains. She sat on the edge of the bed, and the Fu family bracelet on her wrist lightly touched the sheets, making a subtle jingle. The dependence last night turned into empty loneliness at this moment. Early the next morning, the driver drove them out of the hotel and straight to the mansion on the top of the mountain. In the car, Ting stared at the tablet, and she looked out the window at the winding mountain road. The 2 of them didn't exchange a word. The door of the mansion slid open, the butler came to greet him, and the servants carried the luggage. The air is filled with the smell of cold wood wax, the black, white and gray furniture has sharp lines, and every furnishing is like an exhibit in a display cabinet. "Madam, your room is in the east wing of the 2nd floor." The housekeeper led her upstairs. Ting had already entered the study and the door was closed. The room is spacious, the sheets are as smooth as new, the desk is empty, and the walls are bare. She unpacked her luggage and took out her sketchbook and paint box. Before the Xia family went bankrupt, she relied on interior design orders to make ends meet. Now that these tools are on the table, they seem like unnecessary clutter. She tried to adjust her position. Sunlight reflected on the pool surface outside the window. Servants lowered their heads to wipe the deck, but no one came forward to talk to her. In the afternoon, she tidied the wardrobe and folded the wedding dress into the drawer. The wrist bracelet slid and made a soft sound when it touched the wooden edge. Opening another box, I found a stack of folders with the label, Xia's Asset Transfer. She opened it, and the first page was a list of debts, a letter of guarantee from her father, densely packed with numbers. She closed it and sat on the edge of the bed, her chest feeling tight. She signed everything for this. Now the studio is closed, orders have been cut off, and I can't even hold my paintbrush steady. As the setting sun slanted, Fu Ting's car drove into the garage. After the housekeeper finished reporting, he went upstairs and opened the door to her room. She was putting away her sketchbook, which contained an unfinished sketch of the villa. He glanced at it without comment. "Dinner is ready." "Not a question." She pinched the edge of the book and took a deep breath to suppress her anxiety. "There is a chef in the kitchen. They have a rest tonight. The contract states that you perform your duties as a wife." He leaned against the door frame, arms crossed, and the dial was exposed from the cuffs of his suit, reflecting the light. The tone was calm, with irrefutable authority, like giving instructions in the study. She remembered the proviso, free housework. This is the first lesson in getting her to remember the location. He turned and went downstairs, and she followed, still holding the notebook between her fingers. The marble on the kitchen countertop was cold. She opened the refrigerator and took out the steak and vegetables with unfamiliar techniques. The Xia family never allowed her to do cooking, and her fingertips were used to pencils, not the handles of knives. Oil smoke rises, the steak is overcooked, and the burnt edges emit a bitter smell. She brought it to the table, and he was already sitting at the head table, flipping through the newspaper. The dining table is 10 meters long, separated by a chasm at both ends. He took a bite, chewed twice, and put down his knife and fork. "Too salty." He didn't look up. She lowered her head to poke at the salad, the fork scraping the bottom of the plate with a squeaking sound, and she felt sour in her heart. "I once revised 10 designs for a client, but now I mess up even one meal." "I can learn," she whispered, trying to soften. He raised his eyes with sharp eyes. "Eat your own food before you learn." Pushing the plate, he stood up and walked to the wine cabinet. She sat alone at the table, the light lengthening her shadow. The bitter taste of burnt meat on the plate hit her nostrils, and the power gap was so great that it made her breathless. "Last night, my dependence was shattered, leaving only grievance." She wiped away her tears and stood up to clear the dishes. Fu Ting answered the phone on the sofa in the living room. "Chu Tian, Luo's is lowering prices, keep an eye on their actions." His voice was calm, and business battles were as natural as breathing. Late at night, she was lying on an empty bed, and her phone screen lit up. Message from an old colleague: "The seaside villa design project is in urgent need of manpower. We will be on site tomorrow morning." She hesitated for a long time, as the contract did not prohibit working outside the home. This might be a breather. However, driving on mountain roads at night is risky, the fog is heavy, and trucks often speed. She bit her lip, packed her tool bag, and quietly slipped out of the door. The taxi was waiting on the roadside, its engine humming low. As the car went downhill, she looked in the rearview mirror and saw the lights of the mansion fading away, thinking, "At least it proves that she is still valuable." The curve turned sharply, and the lights of the oncoming truck were dazzling. The driver jerked the direction and she leaned forward, a scream stuck in her throat. There was a crash, glass shattered, and everything fell into darkness. The ambulance sirens cut through the night fog, and the tires slid on the gravel of the mountain road. When the stretcher carried out the wreckage of the taxi, Xia Wanqing's wrist bracelet was dangling, and her platinum wedding ring shone in the blood. The sketchbook fell out of the kit, its pages stained with mud, and the lines of waves blurred on the sketch of the villa. There was a sharp pain in her chest, and her consciousness receded like a tide, leaving only the driver's shout echoing. The lights in the emergency room were glaring, and the doctor cut open her coat to expose the bruises on her ribs. An ultrasound showed a ruptured spleen and continued internal bleeding. "Prepare for surgery, notify family members," the attending doctor said to the nurse. His tone was urgent but steady. Her cell phone slipped from her pocket, and the cracked screen showed missed calls, housekeeper 3 times. The location tracking locates the mansion. She is Mrs. Fu, and Fu Ting's number automatically pops up in the contact. In the study, Fu Ting was analyzing the changes in Luo's quotations on his tablet when his phone vibrated. He picked it up, and the butler's voice trembled. "Sir, my wife had a car accident and was admitted to the emergency room of the city hospital. She was seriously injured." His fingers paused and his eyes moved to the dark swimming pool outside the window. "I know." He hung up and didn't ask any more questions. He stood up and grabbed the car keys, but dialed his personal doctor, Professor Zhang, Municipal Hospital, spleen repair, "Bring your team, we will be there within half an hour." The tone was as business instructions. In the hospital corridor, Fu Ting stopped at the elevator entrance and did not enter the emergency area. The assistant reported in a low voice, "Lowe's lowered the price of steel by 50% tonight. Mr. Chu wants you to see it in person." He nodded and turned to the back stairs to avoid the crowd. The door to the monitoring room opened, and the security guard recognized him and stepped aside. He sat in front of the main console, and the screen switched to the live broadcast of the operating room. Xia Wanqing was lying on the table, the bracelet had been taken off and placed on a plate, the doctor's instruments jingled, and the oximeter beeped. Under the operating light, Professor Zhang took over as the surgeon, and his assistant handed over the hemostatic forceps. "Find the bleeding point, clamp it." On the screen, Fu Ting's eyes were locked on her pale face, and the ring on her left ring finger reflected the light alone. The terms of the contract flashed into my mind: no sex for a year, housework responsibilities. She failed to cook last night. When he pushed the plate, she lowered her head and her eyes broke. At this moment, the hands could not hold the knife and fork, but they slipped out with the sketchbook. At the end of the corridor, Chu Tian pushed open the door and entered, still breathing. "Ting, are you here?" He glanced at the surveillance camera and frowned. "Why don't you go in?" "She's your wife." Fu Ting said in a straight voice without turning his head, "Contract wife, the car accident was the path she chose. Tell me, it's a procedure." Chu Tian pulled up a chair and sat down, tapping on the screen, "Procedure. Luo's price reduction is for you. The Xia family's old debt has the shadow of her father. If you reject Luo Li, she won't let it go." Fu Ting tapped his fingers on the table, his rhythm messing up. "She proved her worth and accepted the project, and this is the result." In the picture, the doctor sutures the last stitch and the electrocardiogram stabilizes. Chu Tian came closer and said, "Admit it, you flirted with Professor Zhang and didn't care about the flight delay. This wasn't cold-blooded, it was the fear of getting stuck. Xia Wanqing was different. She had no ambition. The meal last night was burnt and you took a bite." Fu Ting's eyes moved slightly and his Adam's apple rolled. "Shut up. Business war takes priority." Chu Tian stood up and patted his shoulder, "Priority?" Luo Li investigated her details and a preliminary report just came in. Before the Xia family went bankrupt, she refused 3 marriages and supported the studio alone. What you married is not a chess piece, but a woman with backbone. The operation is about to end, go see her. Fu Ting stared at the screen, Xia Wanqing's eyelashes trembled, and she woke up. Professor Zhang took off his gloves and nodded to the camera, "Success." The door to the monitoring room was closed and Fu Ting sat alone. The operation resolved her crisis, her spleen was saved, and she had no major sequelae. But the tablet that Chu Tian left behind lit up, and Luo Li's assistant emailed, attached is Xia Wanqing's detailed file, including a copy of her father's guarantee letter, and an old photo of Xia's father and Luo's old partners. A bigger trouble emerges. Luo Li holds the Xia family's old accounts, and may be able to exploit the loopholes in Fu's debt settlement. He stood up and walked towards the door of the recovery room, his hand stopping on the doorknob. A nurse whispered through the crack in the door. The patient woke up and asked where her husband is. Xia Wanqing's voice was weak. Fu Ting, is he here? Fu Ting tightened his fingers, pushed the door or turned around. At the end of the corridor, Luo Li's call rang, and he glanced at the screen, an unknown number, but he knew it was her. The footsteps stopped, and the night deepened. Fu Ting stared at the name Luo Li on the phone screen, his thumb resting on the answer button. The coldness of the recovery room doorknob still lingered on his palm. He turned around and walked away a few steps, pressing answer button. Say. The voice was low, above the whisper of the nurse outside the door. Brother Ting, I heard something happened to your wife. Luo Li said in a brisk tone, with traffic noise in the background. I just saw the news, municipal hospital. Do you need a team of Dr. Luo's doctors? By the way, lowering the price of steel is a trivial matter. Dad asked me to send a message. There is a loophole in the Xia family's guarantee letter. We have the original copy. She paused, and her voice softened. Let's meet and chat. I'm on my way. Fu Ting's eyes fell to the window at the end of the corridor, where the city lights were dotted in the night. Bring it back to the original price, or Fu will acquire 30% of your equity tomorrow. He spoke calmly, and heard her chuckle before hanging up. The file Chu Tian just mentioned flashed through his mind. The old accounts of the Xia family might be a clue. The contract should have been clean, but now there are more variables. He dialed his assistant's number. Shaoli, send a bouquet of flowers to the recovery room and say I wish you a speedy recovery. Don't mention that I have been here. The assistant responded. He glanced at the door one last time and walked towards the elevator. The car accident was the path she chose, and he had gone through all the procedures, calling a doctor and monitoring the entire process. Emotional involvement will only disrupt the rhythm of business wars. In the recovery room, Xia Wanqing's eyelashes trembled slightly, and her consciousness slowly returned. The first thing that caught my eye was the platinum wedding ring on the ring finger of my left hand. The bracelet was no longer on my wrist. She tried to sit up, and felt a dull pain in her abdomen, like a rope slowly tightening, and pulling at the skin. The nurse opened the door and came in, checking the equipment. Mrs. Fu, you are awake. The operation went well, the spleen was saved, and you can leave the hospital after 2 days of rest. Her throat was dry and her voice was weak. My husband, is he here? The nurse shook her head, an apology flashed in her eyes. I'll go ask. Before she finished speaking, footsteps sounded outside the door. Assistant Shaoli walked in holding a bouquet of white lilies and placed it on the bedside table. His movements were respectful but distant. He handed over a note. Madam, Mr. Fu asked me to convey, get well soon. There are only 5 black words on the note, and there is no extra ink on the white paper. Xia Wanqing took it, her fingertips trembling slightly. She stared at the bouquet, and the water drops slowly slid down the petals, reflecting the night lights outside the window. She first felt a surge of gratitude. At least he remembered to send someone, and the contracted husband didn't completely ignore it. With abdominal pain, she imagined him pushing open the door and holding her hand, just like the brief eye contact on the wedding day. But gratitude cooled quickly. This bouquet of flowers is like the transfer record of the Xia family's debt settlement, calm and procedural. No coming in person, no extra greetings, just these 5 words. Tears rolled down her cheeks silently and dripped on the sheets. She wiped it away, and the pain in her chest intensified. It was not a wound, but an emptiness in her heart. Before marriage, she rejected 3 marriages and supported the studio alone. The sketchbook was her weapon. Now the notebook was destroyed at the scene of the car accident, and the paint box was scattered in the mud. She held the ring tightly, and the emptiness of the bracelet after it was taken off reminded her, these are shackles given by the Fu family, not belonging. Her mind flashed back to her father's bedside, holding a letter of guarantee on her pale face. Wanqing, Fu is the only way out. If you endure it for a year, the studio can reopen. She nodded and signed, which gave her family breathing space but lost their freedom. After the marriage, she tried to cook, and when the plate was pushed away, his eyes showed disappointment. Now in the car accident, he didn't even show his face, only his assistant and a bouquet of flowers. Self-pity surged through her. Why did her efforts always prove to be like air at critical moments? Tears fell again, and she bit her lip to hold them back. The abdominal pain made her curl up. Gradually, the pain forced her to wake up. She can no longer be so dependent. This marriage is a transaction and she cannot become an accessory. Get well soon, take on new design projects, and prove your worth. The studio sketch is still in my mind, and the waves have clear lines. She took a deep breath, sat up straight, pressed the call bell and asked for pen and paper. Resilience rises from self-pity like a scab on a wound. She won't fall apart, this is her way. At dawn, Fu Ting's car arrived at the conference room on the top floor of Fu's building. Chu Tian was already there, and the projection screen showed the changes in Rockwell's stock price, with the red line pointing downwards. Ting, you haven't slept all night. Chu Tian handed over the coffee and got straight to the point. The reason behind Luo Li's price reduction is the loophole in the Xia family's old guarantee letter, which can sue the Fu family for breach of contract and pay hundreds of millions in fines. Her father is Luo's old employer. This is the restart of family feud. Fu Ting sat at the head of the table and tapped his fingertips on the table. Where is the evidence? Chu Tian slid across the tablet and the lawyer's letter scanned and popped up, marking the asset transfer as undisclosed. Not only lowering the price, they are also eyeing European mergers and acquisitions. The details of Xia Wanqing have been found out. She refused 3 marriages and supported the studio alone. You are not marrying a pawn. Fu Ting's eyes fell, and Xia Wanqing's pale face overlapped in his mind. Business war takes priority, but this variable creates more cracks in the contract. The assistant opened the door and reported in a low voice, Mr. Fu, my wife is stable. But Miss Luo just arrived at the hospital and said she wanted to visit. Fu Ting's eyes stern. It's not a coincidence that Luo Li came in person. Her intention is far beyond the distance of a bouquet of flowers. The sound of the assistant pushing the door interrupted Chu Tian's analysis, and he reported in a low voice, Mr. Fu, Miss Luo has entered the recovery room of the hospital. She said she was visiting patients. Fu Ting's fingertips stopped on the tablet, and the Luo's stock price curve was still shaking in front of his eyes. He nodded, signaling to continue the meeting, but Luo Li's chuckle on the phone flashed in his mind. Visiting a doctor is not a good intention. This woman always likes to test the edges, holding the original Xia family guarantee letter as a bargaining chip. Chu Tian glanced at him and lowered his voice, let her make trouble, the hospital is under surveillance. Did Xia Wanqing receive the bouquet of flowers you had last night? She is not a soft persimmon, and Luo Li will have a good time. Fu Ting did not answer, and his eyes fell back to scanning the lawyer's letter. The asset transfer loophole was really difficult. If Luo wants to take advantage of old debts, he must first block the retreat of European mergers and acquisitions. The meeting advanced to the details of the merger and acquisition. He called the European lawyer and his tone was unquestionable, expedited review of Xia's transfer documents. If there are any loopholes, report them to me on the same day. In the recovery room of the hospital, Xia Wanqing was leaning against the bedside, holding a pen in her left hand to draw lines of waves on the paper the nurse had brought. The abdominal pain had subsided and the intravenous drip was finished. She tried to get out of bed and take a few steps, and her steps became more steady. The white lily bouquet is still on the bedside, the water drops have dried and the petals are slightly curled. She touched her wedding ring, thinking about contacting old clients after she was discharged from the hospital. The seaside resort design project could save the studio. The door knocked lightly, and the nurse ushered in a woman. Her high heels tapped against the floor, and the smell of perfume hit her face. Luo Li did not move, but took out a photo from her bag and pushed it in front of her. The corners of the photo are yellowed, and the profile of Fu Ting when he was young is clear. He is holding Luo Li in his arms. The background is the church arch, and there seems to be the light and shadow of rings between their fingers. Her tone was soft, with a hint of regret. This is the engagement photo of Brother Ting and I 3 years ago. We were supposed to get married, but the family business was put on hold. He married you because the Xia family was in debt, you know, right? The original letter of guarantee is with my dad, and the loopholes can open up old scores. Xia Wanqing took the photo, and her fingers froze. Fu Ting's eyes are gentle in the photo, which is completely different from the cold look on the wedding day. The joy in her heart split instantly, like paper being torn, and her throat tightened. What does this prove? Miss Xia, no, Mrs. Fu. Luo Li smiled, carrying the fruit basket and placing it on the bedside table, her movements as graceful as an old acquaintance. I heard about the car accident, so I came here to take a look. Brother Ting is busy, so he asked me to send greetings. She sat on the guest chair, glanced at the sketch on the paper, and sighed, designer. Really talented, but it's a pity that she married into the Fu family, and she was already busy with housework. Xia Wanqing sat up straight with alertness, her belly stretched slightly, and she recognized this was the woman who was testing at the wedding. Thank you for your trouble. I'll be discharged from the hospital soon. It proves that he has someone in his heart. Luo Li stood up without touching the fruit basket. When she turned around, she said, Fu's business war is tense now. You are a pawn. Don't take it seriously. Get well soon and stay out of the way. The door closed and Xia Wanqing stared at the photo, her wedding ring reflecting the cold light under the lamp. The bouquet of thanks to Fu Ting turned into a mockery. This marriage was a transaction, so was there a hidden engagement? She crumpled the corners of the photo and stuffed it under the pillow. The abdominal pain returned and she curled up and lay down. Suspicion is like a needle piercing the tough and newly built wall. Ting, what's that engagement photo? Xia Wanqing's voice was steady and she held her phone tightly. Luo Li gave it to me. It was between you and her in the church 3 years ago. There was silence for 2 seconds on the other end of the line. Fu Ting's tone was as calm as business, don't believe her tricks. You have a 1-year contract and take care of yourself. He hung up without explaining or asking about her injury. Xia Wanqing stared at the black screen, her heart hurting even more. The cold treatment is like a wall. He prioritizes business and war, while she is just a program. She dropped her cell phone and picked up the scraps of her sketchbook, sent back by her assistant after the car accident, with paint smeared across the ocean lines. She couldn't give up. She had to prove her worth and called her old client, Mr. Wang, for the seaside resort case. I will personally revise the draft. See you in the afternoon. At noon, Xia Wanqing was discharged from the hospital, and her assistant Xiao Li took her back to the Fu family's mansion. She didn't speak in the car, and kept repeating the photo in her mind. When she opened the door, the living room was empty, and the kitchen still had scorch marks from the last time she cooked. Fu Ting was not there, so she went upstairs to the room and dug out the Xia family's asset transfer documents in the drawer. The date matched the debt settlement date. The photo appeared, she bit her lip and pressed Fu Ting's number. The bell rang 3 times and he picked it up, with the conference whispering in the background, speak. In the afternoon, Xia Wanqing handed over the revised manuscript at the coffee shop. Mr. Wang looked through it and nodded. Wanqing, the waves have a strong three-dimensional effect, so I signed it. But I heard that you married Fu and the studio is still open. She smiled. Of course, I will take the case independently. The hand holding the pen shook slightly, and the shadow of the photo could not be removed. On the way home, the mobile phone news push, Fu's European merger encountered obstacles, Luo's teamed up with rivals, and the stock price changed. The headline was dazzling, and her heart sank. If the crisis broke out, would he trade divorce for marriage? The lights of the mansion came on and she opened the door. Fu Ting was still wearing his suit and the documents were spread out on the table. He raised his head and glanced at her, discharged. Rest. Without saying anything, he turned and entered the study. Fu's building, the meeting ended, and Chu Tian handed over a new tablet. Rocket stock price is stable, but the European M&A rivals issued a lawyer's letter, accusing Xia of breach of contract on the transfer. The fine is hundreds of millions, and you have to sign it to fight back. Fu Ting rubbed his eyebrows. Xia Wanqing's question was still in his ears. He heard the tremor in her voice, but couldn't let go. Luo Li's move was cruel, forging photos to poke holes in the contract. He stood up and walked to the window. The city skyline was gray. Inform Luo and meet at the negotiation table tomorrow. Let her father bring the original letter of guarantee. Chu Tian nodded and added, Xia Wanqing has a strong backbone. Will your cold treatment push her away? She stood there, her wedding ring heavy. Luo Li's words echoed, you are a chess piece. Suspicion turned to stinging pain, so she didn't ask further questions and went upstairs to lock the door. At night, the light in Fu Ting's study stayed up all night, and the tablet flashed an updated letter from European lawyers. Luo sure added evidence, scanned and attached the original guarantee letter, and doubled the fine. Crisis was surging, so he called Chu Tian, prepare to acquire 30% of Luo's. Let's start tomorrow. Outside the door, Xia Wanqing heard it and stopped in her tracks. If the Fu family collapses, will she, the contracted wife, be the first to be abandoned? She held the photo fragment tightly, and in the night outside the window, the sketch of the seaside resort blurred in her mind. At 3 o'clock in the morning, the lights in Fu Ting's study went out. He went downstairs and past the living room, and caught a glimpse of the fragmentary pages of Xia Wanqing's sketch beside the sofa, with the waves blurred by the paint. He bent down to pick it up, rubbing the edge of the paper with his fingertips, and the vibrating sound on her phone replayed in his mind. The contract should have been smooth, but now it's stuck in my heart. The phone vibrated and Chu Tian called. Ting, Luo's father personally took action and teamed up with his European rivals to add legal letters. The original letter of guarantee was scanned and made public, and the fine went straight to 200 million. The stock price will fall when the market opens this morning, and your acquisition plan must be changed. Fu Ting clenched the broken page, his knuckles turning white. The legal team has been watching the market all night. Old man Luo is playing hard. I will increase the equity by 50%. After hanging up, he looked at the stairs, and the door of Xia Wanqing's room was closed tightly. For Luo Li's trick, she must be stabilized before she can counterattack. At dawn, Xia Wanqing went downstairs to make coffee, feeling a dull pain from an old injury in her abdomen. She opened her laptop and improved the elevation of the seaside resort. Mr. Wang signed the contract yesterday and asked for the first draft in the afternoon. The kitchen door opened and Fu Ting walked in, wearing a neat suit and green eyes. He poured a glass of water and glanced at her. Don't go out today, rest. She stirred the coffee spoon and paused for half a second. I have a case, it's from a seaside resort. The studio can't stop. His eyes fell on the laptop, and the waves jumped. Signed. She nodded, and the wedding ring on her left hand reflected the morning light. I picked it up independently. It won't hinder your business. The air was stagnant, and the shadow of the engagement photo was like a wall. Chu Tian opened the door, carried a breakfast box, and glanced at the two of them. Morning. Ting, there is new news from the Luo family. My father flew to Europe last night to personally sign the anti-merger alliance. The loophole in the guarantee letter killed the transfer of the Xia family. If the fine is huge, the Fu family's European case will be lost. He handed over the tablet, and the picture showed old Luo taking a photo with his opponent. Xia Wanqing lowered her head. Xia's old score was settled again. She stood up and wanted to avoid it, but Chu Tian called out, "Wanqing, I admire your backbone. But Ting, let's take the lead after the backyard is stable. It's good to take a walk on the beach to relax." Fu Ting's eyebrows moved slightly. He put away the tablet and grabbed the car keys. "Let's go to the beach. I will accompany you to check out your design." Xia Wanqing returned to the room and locked the door lightly. She took out the crumpled engagement photo from under the pillow and spread it out under the bedside lamp. Young Fu Ting hugged Luo Li from side to side, and the shadow of the beach was faintly visible behind the arch of the church. She stroked the edge with her fingers, and the words he signed on the wedding contract flashed in her mind. The night wind outside the window was blowing the shadows of the trees, and she turned off the light and curled up into the quilt. "I still have the sketch of a seaside resort in my mind, and I have to hurry up and prove myself." On the beach, Xia Wanqing took off her shoes and stepped on the fine sand, holding her sketchbook under her arm. She squatted to outline the arc of the reef, and Fu Ting stood side by side, the wind ruffling her forehead. He bent down to pick up the shell and handed it to her. "This wave shape is suitable for you." She took it and touched his palm with her fingertips. The two of them walked along the tide line for 10 minutes. He held her left hand and the wedding ring was embedded between his fingers. "The contract is for 1 year, but you are not a pawn. Luo Li wants to break it, but we won't give it a chance." She walked slowly, waves splashed on her skirt, and her heart was half relaxed. Why are the eyes in the photo so gentle? He stopped, and the sea breeze curled his hair, acting, an old debt forced by the family. She did not ask further questions, and for a moment, warmth came from his shoulder. Xia Wanqing's coffee spoon stopped spinning and followed the car. On the highway, the city recedes and the sea breeze comes in through the cracks in the windows. Luo Li's photo was still in her bag, she hadn't lost it. Fu Ting spoke in a relaxed tone, "The photo of Luo Li is from an old file. 3 years ago, her family asked for marriage, but I refused. I'll clear the loopholes in the guarantee." She turned her head, and the sea level gradually approached. "Why didn't you tell me earlier? Treat it coldly, as if you were hiding it." His hand on the steering wheel tightened and relaxed. "Business war takes priority, I will hurt you if I explain late." The car parked outside the resort, and the sound of waves crashed on the shore. Assistant Wang came on time to check the drawings, and Xia Wanqing submitted the manuscript. Fu Ting was listening. "Add a shell wall, a strong selling point." The assistant took note and left. Her smile appeared. "Thank you for your time." He nodded, his eyes scanning the sea and the sky. Inner turmoil. Chu Tian is right, healing the heart comes before business war. The phone buzzed with a message from Chu Tian. Luo's father returned to China and brought new evidence to the negotiation table. Not only the original letter of guarantee, but also a scan of your old engagement agreement. The crisis escalates. The car slid into the Fu family's garage, the engine roaring to a close. Xia Wanqing loosened her seatbelt, and the screen of her mobile phone was still fixed on the cliff curve of Fu's stock price. She glanced sideways at Fu Ting. The furrow between his brows deepened and his knuckles slowly unclenched on the steering wheel. "Is the engagement agreement true?" she asked, her voice unhurried, as if she was confirming an old case. He turned off the engine, turned around and looked directly at her. "I didn't recognize the old document forced by my family 3 years ago. In my heart, I never signed it." She hummed without digging deeper, opened the door and got out of the car. "The shells in the bag touched my hands, and Luo Li's engagement photo was touched beside it." She went straight to the studio, turned on her laptop, and filled in the details of the shell wall. A message from Assistant Wang popped up. "The first draft has been accepted, and an advance payment of 50,000 yuan will be added to the contract tomorrow. She pursed her lips and typed out a reply, independent case, take the first step steadily. Fu Ting took off his suit jacket and hung it in the entrance hall. Chu Tian caught up on the phone, the negotiation room is in place. Mr. Luo will arrive at 2 o'clock. The scan of the old agreement has been published in the media. If he bites you for breaking the marriage, the European Union will follow up with fines. Fu Ting looked at the stairs and paused slightly, I will go there in person. Wanqing, you keep an eye on it. After hanging up, he went upstairs and knocked on the door. She opened a slit and spread her sketchbook on the table, with the waves layered like life. I'll handle the negotiations this afternoon. Don't stop with your case. She nodded, with the old wound in her abdomen still lingering, stand by the seaside, thank you. His eyes fell on the wedding ring on her left hand, and he reached out to touch it lightly, the contract is stable, please believe me once. She held it back with her fingertips for a moment, then withdrew, and the door closed lightly. The long table in the conference room was divided into different sections. Luo Zhen sat at one end, his gray hair combed to perfection. The lawyer pushed up his glasses and projected the old engagement agreement to enlarge it. Fu Ting's signature was glaring, and the date was 3 years ago. Luo Zhen tapped his fingers on the table, 3 short and 2 long, as if to set the pace. Young Master Ting, this agreement has been witnessed by the old man. The marriage is for Luo's equity. If you marry a daughter of the Xia family, you will break the contract first. Give in the European case, otherwise the original letter of guarantee will go to court and the Fu family line will be severed. Fu Ting sat up straight. Chu Tian slid across the tablet, and the counterattack screen showed Luo's transfer of vulnerable data. The agreement is invalid, I refuse to sign with all the evidence. The Luo family's old debt, bite yourself first. Luo Zhen knocked on the table faster, and clicked on a new file, a photocopy of Xia Wanqing's father's guarantee letter, and the handwriting was clear. The Xia family will bite her to death. Your marriage is just a cover. The stock price has fallen, and the acquisition is a ruined dream. Fu Ting clenched his fists slightly under the table, and his heart sank, he underestimated Luo Zhen's alliance. He glanced out the window, and the memory of Xia Wanqing's shoulder on the beach flashed in his mind. No matter how fierce the business war is, the backyard must be stable. On the way back to the car, Fu Ting sped up. Xia Wanqing looked out the window and saw the waves receding. She touched her wedding ring, and the misunderstanding was somewhat resolved, but she heard him whisper, Old man Luo will come to negotiate in the afternoon. New evidence, engagement agreement. Her heart sank, and a notification on her mobile phone popped up. Fu's stock price crashed, and the Luo Alliance's additional old contract was exposed. The shadow of the photo has resurfaced. If this agreement is true, will the position of the contracted wife be shaky? The mansion is in sight, and storm clouds are looming overhead. She served the steamed fish, garnished with shells, still inspired by the seaside. Fu Ting washed his hands and took a seat. How was the negotiation? He took a bite and swallowed. Old man Luo pressed for the old agreement, and I blocked half of it. The stock price fell, but it can hold up. She filled the rice and twirled her chopsticks. When I was at the beach, I wanted to say. On the night of the operation, I was really afraid of death. I didn't see you when I woke up, thinking that the contract was over. He paused with his chopsticks and glanced at the old scar on her abdomen. I stayed outside the door and didn't go in. I was afraid of disturbing you. She raised her eyes and twirled the spoon in the bowl. Circle, why don't you come in? He put down his chopsticks, covered the back of her hand, and rubbed the inner part of her wrist with his fingertips. You are not a household tool. I heard you trembling on the phone, and my heart was stuck, as if I had lost something. She did not pull away, and the air slowly warmed up. Xia Ying's candlelight dimmed. I still have the photo of Luo Li. I believe you, but I'm afraid it will happen again. He whispered, burn it. I'll accompany you tonight. After dinner, She curled up on the sofa, and he turned on the wave documentary, and the sound of waves came in the background. At 1 o'clock in the night, the light in Fu Ting's study was turned on. Laptop remittance investigation report: Luo Li's IP is locked, old photos have obvious traces of P-picture software, and the edges of the engagement agreement scans are synthesized and forged. Chu Tian News follow-up: Luo Zhen flew to Europe and met with lawyers privately. New evidence may be a traitor in the Xia family. But the price is heavy. If the European case is broken, there will be a loss of 500 million, and the acquisition of 50% of Luo's equity will be ruined. Fu Ting walked in front of the window, the shadow of the moon lengthened. There was a sound of water glasses falling on the table in the living room downstairs. He went downstairs and saw Xia Wanqing opening a drawer and laying out Xia's asset transfer documents. She raised her head and said, "Old accounts have been turned over again. Is there really a loophole in my father's guarantee?" As he approached, the handwriting on the document was familiar, and old family secrets came to mind. His missed first love was her missing aunt. "If you say it, half of the contract will be broken." The phone buzzed again, and Luo Zhen sent a new email: he will go to court tomorrow, and the original agreement will be delivered to him in person. The stock price continued to fall in the night market. He turned his back to her, put his fist on the window sill, and his throat was slightly tight. "This time, I can't afford to lose." Negotiations lasted for 2 hours, and Fu Ting gave up 10% of Europe's share in exchange for a suspension of exposure. Luo Zhen stood up and knocked on the table to finish. "It's not flavorful enough." Luo Li said, "You will regret it." When leaving the venue, Fu Ting's phone vibrated, and media headlines flooded the screen. Fu Luo's old contract was re-exposed, and the stock price was likely to be cut in half. Chu Tian whispered, "Ting, there are traces of perjury on Luo Li's IP, please investigate more deeply." Fu Ting nodded, and dialed the internal line in the car. "The investigation team will be sent extra, Luo Li will dig up all the contacts." When he returned to the mansion, the sky was dark. He opened the door, and the kitchen light reflected Xia Wanqing's figure. Fu Ting stood still with his back to her, put his fist on the window sill and released it. He turned around and his eyes fell on the page of Xia's asset transfer form on the table, with a photocopy of it tucked underneath. "The loophole is in the notary seal, which is blurry here. Luo Zhenjiao faked the transfer. If the original is in his hands, it will be troublesome to go to court." He pointed to the corner and lowered his voice. She clicked on it, and the screen enlarged the signature, and the pen tip was exactly the same as his. Her heart seemed to be blocked by something. She pushed the phone hard and it hit the corner of the table and bounced away. Tears instantly came to her eyes. "Is this an old document too? Did you sign 3 copies?" With trembling fingers, he picked up the engagement photo from the bag and threw it onto the pile of documents, with the 3 new photos stacked on top of the old one. Her voice was broken. "I believed you once, but what happened? That night at the beach, you leaned on me and said what you lost, and now? Smoke bombs." Fu Ting frowned, grabbed the phone, glanced at it and his face darkened. "Luo Li's handwriting, IP is being tracked." She wiped her tears, staggered back, and bumped into the sofa. "You can't burn these. My father's reputation will be ruined in court tomorrow. How can I face the Xia family?" The air was frozen, his Adam's apple rolled, and he did not rush to defend. Xia Wanqing rubbed the old wound on her abdomen and raised her head to stare at him. "Dad's handwriting is correct. Why did he sign it? How much does our family owe the Fu family?" Fu Ting closed the document and sat on the edge of the table. "The debt has been paid, and when I took over the Xia family, it was all wiped out. The Luo family wants to settle the old debt." She nodded, and her phone suddenly lit up. Luo Li's public account push, a sequel to Fu Luo's old marriage contract. A new document was exposed, 3 supplementary agreements signed by Fu Ting, dated 2 years apart, marked with confidentiality clause of marriage. Xia Wanqing cooked porridge and garnished steamed eggs with shells. Her hands were shaking when she filled the bowl, and the porridge spilled over the edge. Mr. Wang will inspect the exhibition at noon. I'll go by myself when the advance payment arrives. Fu Ting took the bowl and twirled the spoon. I'll accompany you. Luo Zhen's matter will be handled logistically. She shook her head and poked the fish fillet with her chopsticks. No need for escort. The contract is unstable, don't let anyone else. Tell me I'm holding you back. He put down the bowl and locked his gaze on her left wedding ring. Last night we were leaning against each other, not for acting. We'll see you at the exhibition and I'll drive. She didn't refuse anymore and turned around to pack up her sketchbook. The page of ocean waves was opened, and the details of the new shell wall were finalized. In the car, Xia Wanqing looked out the window and saw tall buildings flashing by. Her fingers rubbed the words, 1-year contract, on the inner ring of the wedding ring. The warmth of her shoulders at the beach still echoed in her mind, but now it seemed like nothing. If you lose in court, the Xia family will still owe you, and I'll leave. Fu Ting's hand on the steering wheel tightened slightly, and he glanced at her. I can't lose. Luo Li perjured herself, locked her IP, and her server last night. She turned around and said, how to prove it? The media is flying all over the sky, and the new signature looks like yours. He slowed down and waited for the red light, with a hint of self-deprecation in his tone. Like me? Because she stole my signature and scanned it to spell it out. The court will decide, your case will pass first. The green light turned on, and the car slid into the resort parking lot. Mr. Wang's assistant greeted him and glanced at Fu Ting while shaking hands. Mr. Fu is here in person, the designer is lucky. Mr. Wang walked around and knocked on the shell. Details are stable, advance payment is 50,000, contract plus 100,000. Sign in the afternoon. She relaxed her shoulders, and the assistant's phone vibrated, whispering in a low voice. Mr. Wang turned to her. I heard that Fu Luo's old contract was in trouble, and Miss Xia's family is stable. Her back stiffened. Fu Ting took half a step forward, and said calmly, business is business, and design is independent. Mr. Wang signed with a smile, and his assistant handed his business card to Fu Ting. The European case is loosened, the Luo family alliance has changed, President Fu will meet later. The door closed. Xia Wanqing hugged the sketchbook tightly against the wall. They all know. Luo Li increased the pressure just to drive me away. Fu Ting took her wrist and gently pulled her out of the room. You can't retreat. Your case is safe, and my backyard is safe. On the return trip, she reviewed the contract and heard the news that 50,000 yuan had arrived. Taking a step independently, Luo Li's shadow was suppressed. You're going to court this afternoon? She asked. He nodded and turned into the city. Chu Tian is in charge, I'll take over. I'll report to you tonight. She hummed, with a faint abdominal pain, and held down her left hand. There are 9 months left in the contract, the document is exposed, and the divorce clause is activated. He stopped at the light, turned around and covered her hand, growling. Said, no separation. Luo Zhen bit the guarantee letter, and I bit back on the Xia family's settlement record. She pulled her hand away, her eyes wavering. I half believed it. Haibian, you said your heart was stuck, and now there are 3 more engagements. Where is the jam? He didn't answer, and the car drove into the Fu family garage. Half an hour before dawn, Chutian's first message came in. Luo Zhen's legal team arrived at the airport, and the European Union suspended the fine. Fu Ting quickly replied, keep an eye on it, with his fingers, and another one followed. Fu's stock price stopped bleeding and rose by 2 points. He breathed a sigh of relief, but saw a second wave. Luo Zhen was delayed in going to court, and there were doubts in the scan of the original document. Fu Ting dialed the internal line to the investigation team, locked the IP overtime and scanned all Luo Li servers. He hung up and went downstairs. The kitchen lights were on. Outside the court in the afternoon, Chu Tian handed over the tablet. Luo Zhen handed over the original scanned document, but the watermark was forged, the court date was delayed for a week, and European fines were frozen. Fu Ting loosened his tie and dialed the internal line on the way back. Luo Li's communication is locked, and the Xia family is digging deeper. Xia Wanqing's acceptance smile flashed in his mind, a shell is like her, tough yet soft. He opened the door to his house, and she was in the studio, with a new document printed out and 3 supplementary agreements signed in red circles. Again. She looked up, her voice stinging. Fu Ting came closer and tore off a page. The composite traces were clear under a magnifying glass. The counterattack starts here. The IP is directed at Luo Li's family. I will personally deliver the evidence. She stood up and touched his sleeves with her fingertips. Why protect me? It's just a contract. He held her hand and touched the wedding rings. It's more than just a contract. I didn't finish last night, that first love. He paused when the words came to his lips. The doorbell rang downstairs, and Luo Li's assistant delivered a letter of reconciliation with a new threatening email inside. His heart sank. If this secret is revealed, will it destroy everything, or will it be salvation? Fu Ting pushed open the studio door, and the ringing of the doorbell downstairs suddenly stopped. He hurried downstairs, and the butler had already taken the envelope, with the red wax seal pressed with the Luo family emblem. After opening it, the settlement letter contained a scanned copy of the Xia family's guarantee letter. The watermark matched that of Luo Zhen's court documents, and the accompanying note said, Fu concealed the transfer of assets and is suing for 200 million for breach of contract. He pinched the edge of the paper with his fingers and turned back upstairs. Xia Wanqing was still standing in front of the table, and the synthesis traces of the 3 supplementary agreements were clearly visible under the magnifying glass. She raised her head. What's downstairs? Luo Li is adding more money. Fu Ting threw the envelope on the table, and the guarantee letter covered the pile of agreements. Luo Zhen bit the old debt, but the court was postponed for a week. I have Xia's settlement record to fight back. She glanced at it, frowned slightly, and touched the asset transfer document on the edge of the table with her fingers. The edge of the notary seal was blurred. Delay does not mean victory. Dad's handwriting is here. Who is the culprit in the Xia family? The two of them sat across from each other at the dinner table, and Fu Ting put a piece of fish fillet in her bowl. The contract for the seashore worth 100,000 yuan has arrived. If you take one independent step, Xia will not be far behind. She stirred the porridge spoon, and the wedding ring on her left hand rotated under the light, with the words, 1-year contract, engraved on the inner circle faintly visible. Independence. Luo Li signed 3 agreements like yours, and the media couldn't stop talking about it. Locking Chu Tian's IP is useful, but what if Dad's reputation is ruined? Fu Ting put down his chopsticks, put his hand on her left hand, and the 2 rings made a thin sound when they touched lightly. It's not just information. The old accounts of the Luo family start from my first love. A message popped up from Chu Tian. There was internal strife among Luo Zhen's legal team, all fines in Europe were frozen, Luo Li's communication records were locked, and she personally uploaded perjury last night. Fu Ting quickly replied, suppress and reconcile, dig out the culprits, put away his phone and pulled out his chair. Eat first. You will smile easily during the inspection this afternoon. The shell wall is stable, and so is my backyard. She hesitated for a moment, nodded, and followed downstairs. The light in the kitchen is soft, the butler serves steamed eggs, dotted with shells, and the edge of the porridge bowl has traces of morning spills. She stopped with her chopsticks and raised her eyes to stare at him. You mentioned the seaside. My heart is stuck. Tell me clearly. Fu Ting's Adam's apple rolled and he looked out the window. When I was 18, the Fu family forced me to marry Luo Li, but I refused. That year when the Xia family was still prosperous, I met your aunt, Xia Wanqing. She was a senior in the design department and took me to the beach to make footprints. She said that traces can be retained, but pain cannot. Xia Wanqing shook her hand, and the porridge spoon slipped, spilling a few drops on the tablecloth. Aunt? She died young in a car accident. You. He nodded, his voice lowered. The family owed Luo an old debt, so I compromised and signed the agreement. Wan Zhou waited for me for 3 years, but something happened the day before the wedding. From then on, Luo Zhen bit the Xia family's guarantee letter and said it was me. She leaned back in her chair, her face turned pale, her fingertips dug into her palms, and she stopped stroking her wedding ring. Did you know that I am her niece? Did you find out before entering into the contract? Fu Ting clenched his fists, his knuckles turning white. I saw old photos when I was checking the Xia family's debt. You are like her, gentle yet prickly. At first sight, I was stuck. She pushed the bowl hard, and the porcelain hit the edge of the table and slid away. The steamed eggs fell over and 2 shells rolled down. Hide it. You leaned on my shoulder at the beach and said what was lost. It turned out that it was my aunt who was lost. Luo Li's old photo picture, the new photo composite, you protect me, is this atonement? Tears slid down her cheeks, she stood up, and the legs of the chair scraped against the floor with a short friction. Dad signed the pledge, for the Xia family and for her. Will you marry me, contract for 1 year, and be my substitute? Fu Ting stood up and stretched out his hand, but she shook it off. The sketchbook fell to the ground from the table, and the pages of the waves were opened. Don't touch it. Luo Zhen went to court to settle old scores. Your first love involved a ghost in the Xia family. Who is the ghost? Is your aunt's photo in your file? His throat tightened and he took half a step forward. It's not a substitute. Wanqing, I. She turned around and rushed out of the dining room, her steps stumbling on the stairs. She felt a dull pain from the old wound in her abdomen. She pressed on the handrail and took a step slowly. I trust you to escort me, but the roots are at my aunt's grave. The divorce terms are activated. He caught up 2 steps and held her wrist. Don't leave. Luo Li's settlement letter threatens you. I will give up the shares in Luo Corporation in exchange for your father's innocence. She broke away and stared at him with tearful eyes, her voice broken. Give up. Like I gave up my aunt back then. There are still 9 months left on the contract. If I leave, the Xia family won't owe you anything. She pushed open the studio door, slammed it shut, opened the drawer, and swept the paint box and Luo Li's old photos into her bag. Fu Ting stood outside the door, clenching his fists and pressing against the wall. A call from Chu Tian rang, Luo Li's servers were all scanned, and the mole targeted Xia's cousin. The evidence will be sent tonight. She turned her back to the door and packed up her sketchbook. The details of the new shell wall were sandwiched between the pages. The wedding ring on her left hand repeatedly rubbed the engraved words on the inner ring. The housekeeper downstairs tried to dissuade her in a low voice, but Fu Ting did not come in. His aunt's footprints on the seaside flashed in his mind, which overlapped with the day Xia Wanqing set foot there. The bag was zipped up, she grabbed the keys and stopped at the door. Leave home, or stay. Night is closing in on the window panes, the court has been adjourned for a week, and Luo's counterattack is imminent. When the secret is revealed, is it redemption or an abyss? Under the lamp in the living room, the housekeeper stood still, holding her coat in his hand. Miss Yi Liang. She took it and put it on without looking back. Thank you, uncle. I'm going to stay at the construction site by the sea for a few days. Fu Ting followed quickly, took 3 steps forward, and grabbed her arm. Construction site. There is internal strife among Luo Zhen's legal team, and European fines have frozen them. I will give up the shares of Luo Zhen in exchange for your father's innocence, and the divorce terms will be invalidated. She shook it off, and the wedding ring drew a cold light under the light, and the inner ring was engraved into the root of her finger. Give up. There are 9 months left in the contract. You gave up on my aunt back then, and now you want to redeem me? Get away. The door lock turned, she opened the door, and the night swallowed her figure. Xia Wanqing's fingers rested on the doorknob, and the night breeze squeezed in through the cracks in the window and rolled up the corners of the sketchbook. She held down the old wound on her abdomen and opened the door. Fu Ting was still leaning against the wall, his fists unclenched and clenched, and the ringtone of Chutian's call vibrated in his pocket. He raised his head and said in a low voice, "Wanqing, my cousin from the Xia family is a traitor. The evidence from Chu Tian will be here tonight." She turned sideways to avoid his sight, tucked her bag into her shoulders, and walked downstairs. The wooden planks of the stairs made a muffled sound under my feet, and every step brought a twinge of abdominal pain. Fu Ting rushed out of the threshold, her car's taillights lit up in the driveway, and the tires scraped against the gravel. He stepped forward to block it and put his hands on the front of the car. "Wanqing, the watermark on Dad's guarantee letter has been filed in court. Xia has paid off, and I have a record to fight back." The engine roared, and she lowered the window, her tears dried into thin lines, her voice was calm. "Luo Li's old photosynthesis agreement, you protect me because I am like Wanzhou. The Xia family is ruined, and I can pay back the 100,000 contract independently. That's enough." The door lock was locked, and she reversed around him, her taillights disappearing at the end of the bend. As the car drove onto the coastal highway, Xia Wanqing tightened her grip on the steering wheel. Her abdominal pain suddenly intensified, like a knife blade churning inside her. She braked slowly, pulled over, held the wound and took a deep breath. The moment at the dinner table flashed in her mind, the porridge spoon slipped, and the ring clinked softly when Fu Ting held her hand. How long had he kept the old photos of his aunt at the beach hidden in his file? She stepped on the accelerator, the lights of the construction site loomed ahead, and the receipt of 100,000 yuan for the independent design draft proved that she did not need anyone. Fu Ting pushed open the door of the study room, and the letter from Luo's lawyer was spread out on the table. The settlement letter said, "Default of 200 million in asset transfer," was eye-catching. He sat down, opened the drawer, and took out an old photo of Xia Wanzhou. The edges of the photo were yellowed and the footprints on the seaside were blurred. "Grow bigger. Say." Chu Tian sighed. Fu's Southeast Asian Minerals, with a market value of 2 billion, was transferred to Luo Zhen in exchange for all old debts, and the settlement letter was withdrawn. Luo Li's server was scanned, and her father's lawyer team collapsed. "You won the business war, but lost the family property. Prove to Wanqing that you are not a business machine." Fu Ting ran his fingers over the photo, replaying the smile of Wanzhou when he was 18 years old at the beach in his mind, which overlapped with the day when Xia Wanqing accepted the construction site. He closed his eyes for a moment and clenched his fists. Dad's trump card. But when she went downstairs to complain about abdominal pain, I couldn't stand still. Outside the study door, the housekeeper knocked on the door and came in. On the tray in his hand were the remaining shells of steamed eggs, 2 of which had fallen down. "Master, the lady has a seaside design draft and a new shell wall page in her bag." Fu Ting took one and rubbed the cracks on the surface with his thumb. She independently accepted 50,000 plus 100,000. "The Xia family is about to turn over, but I am stuck in her aunt's shadow." The sound of turning pages came on the other end of Chu Tian's phone. Luo Li sent a new email tonight, and the assistant confirmed that she knew that Wanqing had run away. She attached a photo of you two at the beach, with the note, "The stand-in game is over." She took advantage of the situation. "Ting, if you don't chase, Luo family will fight back and kill the Xia family." Fu Ting stood there with his knees slightly bent and his phone vibrating. Chu Tian's voice came out, "Ting, the mole has locked up. Yesterday, the Xia family's cousin received a transfer of 500,000 yuan from Luo Li. He leaked the guarantee letter to Luo Zhen. The evidence email was sent to you." Fu Ting frowned and turned back to the house. The light in the living room lengthened his shadow. "It's not just the mole." Wanqing left, and she activated the divorce clause. Chu Tian paused for 2 seconds, and then his tone became serious. Luo Li went to court for a week. You bit Xia's settlement record to fight back, but she misunderstood the substitute and the contract was broken. Giving up Luo's equity is not enough, so it is bigger. The Luo's building was brightly lit. Luo Li was leaning against the elevator door, the collar of his suit was loosened, and the composite photo was reflected on the screen of his mobile phone. She raised her head and raised the corners of her lips slightly. Ting, Wanqing ran away. Isn't it funny that the substitute misunderstood? My father will bite you 200 million. Is it worth it for you to protect the Xia family? Fu Ting stopped, his eyes as cold as iron. The assistant handed over the document bag, which was sealed with red wax and embossed with the new Rockwell emblem. All the perjury servers were scanned, and your communication was locked last night. The new version of the settlement is to give the Southeast Asian mine to your father in exchange for the withdrawal of the lawsuit. Luo Li opened it and glanced at it, her eyes flashed with suspicion. She took half a step forward, and touched his chest with her fingertips. Minerals? For her. You refused to sign for Wanzhou, and now you are losing part of your empire to pursue your contract wife? Fu Ting stood up and hit the edge of the table with his fist. The asset transfer document slipped down, and the blurred edge of the notary seal met the watermark of the guarantee letter. He dialed the assistant's internal line, prepare a car and go to the Luo family building. The settlement letter was revised to give up the Southeast Asian minerals in exchange for Luo Li's withdrawal of the lawsuit, Qing Xia's old debt, and Luo Li's perjury. The assistant hesitated. Master, that mine will be Fu's cash cow for the next 10 years. Execute. Hanging up, he grabbed the car keys and passed by the studio. Empty light came from the crack in the door, and the paint box and Luo Li's old files were nowhere to be seen. At 2 o'clock in the morning, the light of the lighthouse at the seaside construction site flickered. Xia Wanqing curled up on the narrow bed in the temporary wooden house, with the sketchbook in her bag spread out, and a few drops of rainwater sprinkled on the new shell wall sketch. She rubbed the inner ring of the wedding ring, and the inscription, 1-year contract, felt hot under her fingertips. There is no message on the phone, and abdominal pain is coming in waves. I hold the position to slow down my breathing. The sound of waves crashing on the shore outside the window is like the footprints in my aunt's old photos, washed away and left again. Can Fu Ting give up his equity in Lowe's, or even more, in exchange for September's trust? The cold night seeped into the seams of the quilt. She tightened her coat, and her lonely shadow was reflected on the glass. He sidestepped. Sign. There is internal strife in Luo Li's legal team. Europe is frozen, and your dad needs this to stabilize the situation. Luo Li laughed briefly. What a generous deal. But Wanqing had an old abdominal injury and was alone at the construction site by the sea. The night wind was strong and she couldn't hold on. Fu Ting turned and left without stopping. She has an independent contract of 100,000 yuan, so she can hold on. The elevator door closed, he leaned against the wall and closed his eyes, the footprints on the seaside overlapped in his mind. Xia Wanqing curled up on the narrow bed in the wooden room, held her abdomen and took a deep breath. The old injury was aching. She reached out and grabbed her phone. The screen lit up with a bank message. The final payment of 100,000 yuan for the seaside resort contract had been received. It was enough to prove her independence, she thought to herself. After the Xia family's debts were cleared and the divorce terms were activated, they could reopen the design studio. Another new email was automatically downloaded, and the attached photo of Luo Li at the beach came into view. She was side by side with Fu Ting, and the red text said, "The substitute game is over." The abdominal pain worsened, and she sat up while holding on to the wall. Footsteps suddenly sounded outside the door. Fu Ting opened the door and came in. The cuffs of his shirt were soaked, and the document bag in his hand was still smelling of red wax. The assistant had just hung up the phone. "Master, the new version of the settlement has been signed. Luo Li has personally confirmed the withdrawal of the lawsuit, and the Southeast Asian mineral transfer is being notarized." Luo Li's legal team is frozen in Europe, and he has no choice. Fu Ting nodded, his eyes locked on the hand pressing her abdomen. Wanqing, I intercepted Luo Li's mail. The traitor is your cousin. He remits 500,000 Luo Li. I'll bring the evidence. He took out the printed form and matched the time stamp with the guarantee letter. Fu Ting's knees sank and he knelt on the wooden board. The document bag was spread out, and the notary seal of the mineral transfer was bright red and glaring. It's not a substitute. When I was 18 years old, Wan Zhou's footsteps on the beach taught me to leave a mark. It's not about owning, but about washing and stepping with her. She interrupted him and stared down at the shell page of the sketchbook, the rain halo marks expanding. How long have you hidden your aunt's photo? On the day we shook hands at the beach, did you know that I was her shadow? Fu Ting raised his head and spoke in a low voice. The file has been in the file for 5 years, but Luo Li didn't mention it before digging it out, because she was afraid that you would end up like her. After the operation, you pressed your belly and went downstairs, and I guarded the door. It was not a contract, but because I was afraid of repeating it. She took a half step back and glanced at the paper, suspicion flashing in her eyes. Cousin. Luo Li bribed him to leak the guarantee. Fu Ting took a step forward and spoke calmly. Yes, Chutian's email locked the transfer. The perjury server was scanned, her communication was exposed last night, and the withdrawal of the lawsuit took effect in the early morning. Xia Wanqing bent down and pressed her abdomen. The independent 100,000 contract made her waist stiffer. That's enough, I can leave. There are still 9 months left on the contract. What do you mean by giving up the minerals in exchange for me staying? Chutian's call vibrated, and Fu Ting pressed speakerphone. Ting, the announcement of Luo Zhen's withdrawal of the lawsuit has been issued, and the stock price has stabilized. The recording of my cousin's surrender has been obtained, and the Xia family's old debts have been cleared. When Xia Wanqing heard this, she let go of her hand and opened the door, letting the sea breeze sweep in the salt grains. The announcement clears my name. My cousin surrenders. I will delete Luo Li's post. But you kneel down and stand up. Fu Ting stood up, with sawdust stuck to his trouser legs, and picked up the documents. I can't afford it until I kneel down. The contract will be re-signed from the seaside in September. She turned around and put her sketchbook back, and stepped out of the threshold, with the beach in front of her. Let's go and see if the footprints wash away the shadows. At 3 o'clock in the morning, the lighthouse beam swept over the two people. Xia Wanqing took off her shoes and stepped on the sand. The waves surged onto her insteps, and the new shell wall loomed. She stopped and looked back. Will your father be held accountable for the price of minerals? Fu Ting took off his shoes and walked side by side, and their footprints were smoothed away by the waves. Follow me, I have 70% of my empire left, enough to accompany you in the design studio. She rubbed her wedding ring, the engraved words on the inner ring were hot to her hands, and her inner monologue surged. He chose me not to atone for his sins, but now. After his aunt left, the Xia family fell apart. His first love refused to sign a marriage agreement. Is this an indirect source of debt? Dad, I promise that the watermark on the book is correct. Have you counterattacked? He nodded, and the water was up to his ankles. It's not about atonement, it's about choosing you. In the midst of the waves, she didn't answer, her footsteps were stepped heavily, and the platinum ring reflected the waves. Xia Wanqing squatted down and picked up the steamed eggshell fragments from her bag. The cracks met the old marks on his palm. She hesitated, and her fingertips came to rest on the inscription, 1-year contract, on the inner ring of the wedding ring. My heart surged, he gave up 2 billion cash cows and knelt here to beg for an opportunity. Is his aunt's shadow really gone? Or is it a business calculation? The abdominal pain subsided a little, and she stood up. Shell wall acceptance, you give in to Luo, now the minerals. I can't digest it. Fu Ting held her hand and touched the ring lightly. Give time, take a walk to the beach and wash away your footprints. The two walked back to the lighthouse side by side, and she rubbed her abdomen gently. The pain has subsided, contract. Confession on the beach, we will decide after hearing it. Fu Ting held her hand, his footprints extended behind him, and the waves had not completely dispersed. Will the final confession by the sea be successful? Waves surged up to her ankles again and again. Xia Wanqing stopped and the lighthouse beam swept over her face. She let go of Fu Ting's hand, bent down to pick up a complete shell, and turned it to reflect it on the sea surface. We'll decide after listening to it, you say. The abdominal pain had subsided into a faint throbbing. She straightened up, half of her sketchbook slid out of her bag, and a corner of the rain-shocked page revealed a wave line. Fu Ting didn't speak in a hurry. He squatted down and used his fingers to draw two side-by-side footprints on the wet sand. The edge of the wave just stopped. When I was 18 years old, Wan Zhou brought me to this beach, saying that the footprints were not carved to death, but to create new paths. After she left, I signed a family marriage agreement, and the Xia family's debts have been entangled since then. He raised his head, his knees sinking into the sand, and his voice was diluted by the wind. I didn't deny Luo Li dug up the files because I was afraid that after you found out, you would reject everything like her, including me. Xia Wanqing rubbed her wedding ring, and the words on the inner ring flashed under the light. She recalled the footsteps outside the door of the wooden house, and the steamed eggshell fragments met the old marks on his palm. Dad guarantees the watermark on the letter. If you knew the flaw earlier, why didn't you tell me earlier? Fu Ting put his hand on the back of her hand and touched the ring lightly. Tell me earlier, would you believe that there is sincerity in a business marriage? The announcement of Luo Zhen's withdrawal of the lawsuit was issued this morning. I will have Chu Tian notarize the Xia family's asset transfer documents. Once the debt is cleared, I will release the land for your design studio. She withdrew her hand, stood up and took 2 steps back, and the sea water covered her footprints. Land? Another deal? She squatted beside him, clenching the shell tightly and digging into the lines with her fingertips. Refuse? You hid my aunt's photo for 5 years and guarded the door on the day of the operation. Are you afraid that I would refuse the treatment? Fu Ting nodded, and the sand stuck to his knees. Yes. After the car accident, you pressed your belly and went downstairs. I thought the contract was over, but I couldn't bear to leave. The mineral transfer of 2 billion is not to clear the debt, but to prove that I choose you now. The phone vibrated, and he glanced at Chutian's call and pressed mute. The recording of my cousin's surrender has been uploaded to the prosecutor's office. All Luo Li's contacts have been exposed. Her father's legal team has collapsed and there is no backup plan. The lighthouse beam swept across for the 3rd time, her vision was blurred, and tears fell down her face, dripping into the sea water. The sketchbook fell on the sand, the new shell wall page was opened, and 2 side-by-side marks appeared on the edge of the rain halo. The rest of your life. Your father's asshole, Luo Li's seaside photo, I deleted it, but the shadow. Fu Ting took out the red wax document bag from his arms, and the notary seal of the mineral transfer was bright red in the waves. The shadows have been washed away. I blocked all Luo Li's new mails and locked the server. She went to jail and waited. My cousin transferred 500,000 yuan, and the prosecutors recovered the Xia family. He opened the bag and found a blank contract paper inside, with the pen in place. Sign it or tear it up, I'll listen to you. She picked up the sketchbook, the paint box rolled out, and the shell fragments scattered at her feet. There was a throbbing in her abdomen, and she held it down, but she laughed out loud and her tears were still wet. Surgery vigil, seaside escort, mining begging. Fu Ting, you have changed from a machine to a human. Fu Ting took half a step on his knees and held her ankle. The sea water was warm. It's changed, for you. The design studio opened, I was the first guest, and the shell wall was promoted all over the world. Xia Wanqing squatted down, pointed the ring at the paper, and lowered the tip of the pen, Fu Ting, Xia Wanqing, true love marriage, indefinitely. The ink blurred, and she hugged his neck in tears, sand sticking to her lips. Get up, the footprints will last forever, step on them together. He stood up to catch up, his pants wet to his knees, and there was a rare urgency in his tone. It's not a deal. Dad just called me to hold the mineral company accountable. He froze 70% of my equity. I signed it. Xia Wanqing turned around and stared at him, the wind ruffling her hair. Frozen equity? 30% of Fu's empire is left. Is it worth it for you to kneel on the beach and beg me to stay? Fu Ting stopped, bent his knees again, and knelt beside the waves. The sand and water were turbid and covered his calves. It's worth it. Wanqing, from the contract to the seaside, I missed the evening boat and the Xia family's debt, but I won't miss you this time. Marry me, not for a year, but for the rest of your life. Sign it again, starting from the footprints. Fu Ting stood up and wrapped his arms tightly around her waist. The footprints of the two of them extended behind the waves. New waves surged up, only erasing the edges and deepening the mark in the center. Chuqian's phone vibrated again, and he pressed the speaker. Ting, Dad compromised. The condition for unfreezing the equity is that you two attend the board of directors. Luo Li withdraws, and Xia's cousin is sentenced to probation. Xia Wanqing leaned on his chest, and after hearing it, she whispered, Dad will be happy, the debt will be cleared. Fu Ting kissed her forehead, and the sea breeze rolled up the remaining pages of the document. I'm happy. Our design office's first project is seaside expansion. At 4 o'clock in the morning, the light of the lighthouse gradually faded, and the sky turned white. She took his hand and stepped on the third trail, but the waves followed but couldn't catch up. The abdominal pain is gone, but the old injury is gone. Fu Ting looked down at her, and the old marks on his palm met the shell fragments. The new road starts from here. The silhouettes of the two stretch out on the beach, and the light of their platinum rings reflects the morning glow. Their footprints remain behind and will never be washed away. How will their love blossom into a new chapter in the business world?